You are listening to The Edge, a podcast for personal development junkies and visionaries living right at the precipice of oh shit meets fuck yeah. I'm Nadia Munda, an embodiment and relationship coach and a lover of all edges. Stick around to listen to raw, unpolished conversations where we explore our personal and collective edges in all their erotic glory. So today's solo podcast is happening on my iPhone. I am recording this in Lebanon, in the mountains. And this episode is fueled by some white wine, some Arabic coffee, some batlewa, which to Americans is pronounced baklava. And it's just how we do things here. It's a very typical state of being, I think, in Europe and the Mediterranean, to drink alcohol, then drink caffeine, and still just sort of be in a pretty normal state of being. I know that in the States, it's a very different experience where it's like, well, why would you go down and then back up and then back down? And it's like, it's just, I don't know if it's our genetics or what, but we don't really have that physical experience. So like, it's pretty standard to go out for lunch, have a couple of glasses of wine, have some coffee afterwards, be it espresso or Arabic coffee. And the reason I'm actually podcasting right now is, in a rare occasion, I have some spaciousness and I have some inspiration because everyone else is napping, which is the other thing that we do. So we have wine, we have coffee, and then we nap. And no one has any problems with that. Again, I think this is a concept that maybe is a little bit more confusing to a North American. But yeah, Europe and the Middle East and Mediterranean, that's the whole region, it's pretty standard. And that's not what today's topic is about at all. But I just wanted to give you guys some context. So here I am in Lebanon. It's a Monday afternoon. I was not planning on recording any podcasts while I was here. I usually shut off completely when I'm over here, but I felt really inspired actually this time. It's interesting. In August in Lebanon, it is usually insanely hot. Even in the mountains, like, you're going to be in a bathing suit by the pool. Like, it's pretty warm. And I haven't really packed much in terms of layers. And it currently is. We've been in a fog all day, and it's been raining on and off. I was supposed to go to the beach today. No sign of that happening today or tomorrow, which is part of why I have some spaciousness that is not very typical for my trips back home. And so here I am. Everyone else is having their little afternoon siesta. I am in bed, so you may hear the sheets on and off as I move my arms, but I have no desire to sleep. I'm not really a napper, to be honest. So I want to talk about something incredibly important today. I will say that I am right at the edge. I haven't fully dove deep into this yet, but I'm right at the edge of what I think might be the deepest spiritual inquiry of my life. And so I wanted to share a little bit with you. And this is something I've been in for quite a while. And if you're someone who listens to the podcast pretty habitually, you will know that I've been in this crazy chapter of the void. which by the way continues with the weather here. Like it's so funny. Like I'm like, I just want to be in the sun in a bathing suit, which is like my happy, happy place. Like I cannot be miserable when I'm in the sun in a bathing suit. Ideally by the ocean or sea, but even a pool will do. I don't mind it. And I was so ready, I had all my bathing suits packed and was like, let's go. And now it's just been raining and everyone's like, this is so weird. What is up with this weather? And I feel like all year, the weather externally has been a little bit of a metaphor of my internal weather because I have tried to escape Boulder to go to Mexico. I was freezing my ass off. I went to Hawaii. It was raining the whole time when it wasn't supposed to. Yeah, I just all summer in Boulder was like bizarrely rainy. Like it's like Boulder is not a wet place. It's the driest of dry summers, and it was just raining all the time. Every time I'd get into a bathing suit to go to the park and to take a dip in the creek, it would rain. And so it's just been this interesting journey, which connects to what I want to talk about today of just like I'm trying to chase warm weather and sun, and life keeps handing me rainstorms and fog and gray. And I'm like, okay, all right, this is not of my preference, but I will work with this. And recording this podcast is my way of working with what feels like incredibly depressing weather for Lebanon. I feel like I'm in England right now. It's just gray as fuck. So, I want to talk today about making peace with I don't know, in quotes, the concept, the feeling, the state of being, I don't know. And I really, really think that I'm just scraping the surface of what's going to be one of the deepest, if not the deepest spiritual lesson of my entire life. I want to share this with you because I'm curious as to where you are, and I'm hoping that this episode will maybe start to have you ask certain questions or just ponder a few things that might possibly shed light on where there is pain and suffering in your life. So, I don't know. Okay, the phrase, the concept, the statement, I don't know, is one that I hated most of my life. And so it's interesting that a few years ago I started to date and eventually be in partnership with a man who his number one response to anything I would ask was, I don't know. And it would drive me crazy. I mean, it was one of our most like top points of contention. It was just like, what do you mean you don't know? There was something about the fluidity, the uncertainty that would just make my skin break into hives. And I was just like, I just kept being faced with, I don't know, Nadia, I don't know. And every time I would hear it, I would just get itchier. And me, I'm a certified recovering control freak, and not knowing was to me a big, if not the biggest faux pas. It was just such a big no-no for me. And it would drive me absolutely insane. I just didn't understand. What do you mean you don't know? What do you mean you don't know? Any question about anything, the answer I'd get is, I don't know. And this year, I'd say probably from the beginning of 2023, I really started to work with this concept of I don't know. And it started to become really clear that on some level, my soul had chosen, or life had chosen for me, however you want to interpret it, to be with a partner who was the exact opposite of me, and who was also the exact opposite of my father, who I mimicked a lot in terms of, I am the creatrix of my life. I can control anything I want. I can do anything I want. I'm in control. I manage my life, right? And this is not completely incorrect either. So I'm not dismissing this philosophy completely, but this was the program I grew up with. This was the mentality, the ethos, the culture in the household that I grew up with, was with a father who just today, earlier, was telling me the story of how when he was 13, he grew up in a very, very poor family, and there was literally no future in sight for him. And something happened where he sees that as his moment, his epiphany, his enlightenment, his wake-up call at 13, where he decided, all right, I'm taking my life into my own hands. I have to control my life if I want to make anything out of it. And as a result, he on his own at 13, without his parent, went off and decided to change schools, and it basically led to a whole different path that he went down, and it allowed for all these opportunities, which eventually had him get to a point where he was an incredibly successful, well-connected multimillionaire. And so he was telling me the story, even just today. And I was just thinking, wow, here's my dad, the main masculine figure I grew up with. And then there is my last partner, who also is still till this day, although we are not together, one of the key, if not the key masculine figure in my life. And they're like total opposites, like total opposites. One had a life path, and they're not right or wrong. That's the thing. One life path was all about the dharma of I can take over my life. I can be in control. I have the power through control. I'm going to create opportunities that I didn't think were possible. I'm going to open doors that weren't possible for someone of my socioeconomic circumstance, right? And that was that journey. And what a beautiful journey. And the journey that needed to happen for my father. And then there's the journey of the man in my life now, who just responds, I don't know, to anything. And so, of course, you can understand why it would drive me absolutely bonkers, because I'm like, what do you mean? I grew up with, even if you don't know, figure it out. Come up with an answer. Figure something out. Problem solve. You have the power, right? Like all of this stuff. But of course, at that time, power was equated with control. And I think what I'm starting to realize is these are two totally different things. And that's part of why I'm working with this theme of I don't know this year. Because earlier this year, I went to Bali, and it really started to make itself so incredibly clear. Bali is such a sacred place where I feel like it is impossible not to be with, at least for me, with like my truest essence when I'm in Bali. Like everything gets stripped away, and it's like, okay, let's get to the core of what's going on here. And the core of what was happening for me in Bali was I don't know shit. I don't know shit. I am 41 years old, and I do not know anything. And that trip to Bali was really like a punctuation for what felt like over a year and a half or so of an ego death that just wouldn't end, just kept going. I've talked about it so many times. And the ego death was, the death of the fighter in me, which is the strongest program that's been running my entire life and has gotten me really fucking far, to be honest. It's gotten me to where I am now. Otherwise, I would just be in Lebanon. I'd be in Lebanon, probably married to some dude. I don't know. Honestly, who knows, right? I don't know. Coming back to that. So the death of the fighter, the death of the control freak, the death of a lot of my war trauma, and how the control freak and the fighter came from that. the death of a worldview that's just no longer serving me. And that worldview is I gain my sense of power from my control. And in that death, in that dissolution, is just a whole pile of I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know if I'm meant to be in a monogamous or a poly relationship or somewhere in between. I don't know if I really am supposed to be a mom in this lifetime. I don't know if coaching is my absolute calling and whether it is sustainable as a life and a career for me. I don't know if I am so on the right path or completely off track. I don't know if my attempt at doing love a whole different way is like absolutely genius and like forward thinking or the dumbest thing I've ever done. I don't know if on some level I secretly want to be a millionaire and I'm just resisting it, or if I just don't give a shit about money, as long as, the basic survival shit is handled. I don't know what my life will look like in 5 years, and I don't know if I made good decisions in the last 5 years. Like, I just don't know. And coming to this place of I don't know has been so incredibly humbling because, one, it has helped me understand my former partner so much more. Like, so much more. I have a deep reverence to the way that he approaches life, to the trust and faith he has in the unknown, to the way that he just suspends himself in limbo and is like, cool. And the way that he holds his power in the lack of control and in the lack of knowing. Now, in line with the theme of I don't know if I'm ultimately going to end up someone who is so extremely like him and just answering I don't know to everything, or if I'm going to end up somewhere in the middle, which it tends to be my path, where I'm like, okay, we do have control of our own lives to a certain extent, and we also don't. I do know some things, and I also don't know a lot of things. Like, what if it's somewhere in the middle, right? Which tends to be my way. Or if I somehow loop back around to the program that I've been running on for 40 years, which is get it together, Nadia. You can do whatever the fuck you want. Just work your ass off and do it. Go. Let's go. Hold the vision, create a strategy, go. So it's interesting because for so many years I've been wanting to read this book, When Things Fall Apart, A Heart Advice for Difficult Times by Pema Chodron. I never know how to say her name, to be honest. I'm sorry. Sorry if I slaughtered it. And I never got this book. I don't know why. It's one of those classic books like Eckhart Tolle. And, there's just like a few that I feel like are on everyone's shelf. And this is one of those. And something happened a couple of weeks ago where I was like, it's time to read the book. When you just have those moments like, it's time to hire this person. It's time to read this book. It's time. And so I remember ordering it on Amazon, being like, okay, I'm going to take this book to Lebanon. This will be my book in Lebanon. I don't really get much time to read. We're constantly running around doing things. But I was like, all right, I need to have at least one book. And funny enough, I forget about ordering the book, and the book arrives the day after this new man who I had just started dating, who I was incredibly excited about, basically dropped. I said dropped, and then my pen just dropped. So funny. And who just dropped sort of like a big bomb on me, so to speak, an emotional bomb where essentially things had to end. And I was not happy. I was really back in grief. It triggered a lot of things that weren't even connected to our relationship. But again, we're connected to where I am in my life and my wounds and what's been coming up for me. And I opened this Amazon package thinking it's like supplements I ordered for my trip. And I'm like, oh shit, when things fall apart. Talk about good timing. And then I just cried. I sat in front of my altar and cried and read this parts of this book. And there's just a little piece of something I want to read because, it's really amazing. Things just always show up at the right time. And there was a post I wrote right before reading this chapter in this book, funny enough, called Finding the Power in Hopelessness, or something along those lines was what it was called. And I was starting to speak a little bit to like me letting go of control and finding power in places where I know I have no control. And this chapter in When Things Fall Apart is called Hopelessness and Death. And if you want to laugh even more, the guy who created, well, no, he didn't create the grief in me, but the guy who created the scenario that then created grief in my system, or reactivated grief that's already been there, let's be real, was a Buddhist. And this, Pema Chodron is definitely a Buddhist, and they actually both studied under the same teacher here in Boulder. So that's interesting too. Anyways, so let me read a little something. In Tibetan, this is from chapter 7, Hopelessness and Death. In Tibetan, there's an interesting word. I'm probably going to pronounce this wrong, guys. Yitang che. We'll just call it that. The ye part means totally, completely, and the rest of it means exhausted. Altogether, yitang che means totally tired out. We might say totally fed up. It describes an experience of complete hopelessness, of completely giving up hope. This is an important point. This is the beginning of the beginning. Without giving up hope, that there's somewhere better to be, that there's someone better to be, we will never relax with where we are or who we are. And then later it says, Yitang Che expresses the renunciation that's essential for the spiritual path. Hopelessness means that we no longer have the spirit for holding our trip together, aka being a control freak. We may still want to hold our trip together. We long to have some reliable, comfortable ground under our feet, but we've tried 1,000 ways to hide and 1,000 ways to tie up all the loose ends, and the ground just keeps moving under us. Trying to get lasting security teaches us a lot, because if we never try to do it, we never notice that it can't be done. Turning our minds towards the Dharma speeds up the process of discovery. At every turn, we realize once again that it's completely hopeless. We can't get any ground under our feet. So I'm still deciding if I fully believe it to be that extreme, but there's some pretty deep ass wisdom in here. I think that I was such a control freak deep down inside, and blah blah, because of the war was unpredictable, everything was a disaster. Of course I'm going to come out a control freak. Hello, just taking a moment away from the episode because there's a new event with Chris Bale that we are hosting together for both of our communities on October 7th. We are so excited to be doing these. We do them whenever we feel super inspired, and we were feeling it. So here we are. If you would like to sign up to get all the details and get more info on that, you can head to tinyurl.com/Chris Nadia waitlist, and you'll be the first to know when the registration opens. So again, that's tinyurl.com/Chris Nadia waitlist, all one word, or you can just find the link in the show notes of this episode. I will let you get back to the episode, and I hope to see you there. Add on a dad who's, who learned, and it was his actual lesson in life, to learn to take control, to take reins of his life, taught me to do the same. And so the combination of those things had me certified control freak. And it wasn't necessarily a bad thing. Like if you look at Beyonce, I'm pretty sure I've heard she's an absolute control freak. I mean, her level of impeccability and excellence that she requires for her shows requires control. So not everything, like there's some beautiful things that come out of control freaks. I think there's some beautiful things that came out of me as a control freak. And it's clear that something happened a year and a half ago where I proved to myself, okay, I can make this amount of money from my coaching business, blah, blah, blah. And I remember distinctively feeling a switch flip inside me. Like I hit a number and I just went, okay, cool, did that. Like it was like I checked something off the list. And now, so for some people, they need to hit like $1 million in revenue to have that switch flip. For some people, they don't have a number, so they're never going to get there. That switch will never flip. But for me, luckily, I guess, so just maybe it's luck, maybe it's not. But for me, my number wasn't that high. But it was just high enough for me to feel like, I made it. I'm good. And the moment I proved to myself that I could make that number, suddenly that striving and that controlling didn't matter anymore. And something completely shifted in my system. And at first I was like, oh, that's cute. I'll take 6 months off. I have savings because I made money, blah, blah, blah. And then I was like, okay, great, let's start again. And then like it never started again because I went back in. Yes, I had a slightly different attitude. I was like, I'm going to go slower. I'm going to have less clients. Like I did have shifts. I came in not going right back to the way I was hustling before. But it wasn't enough of a shift clearly for my soul because things never fully went back to how they were. They were operating. I had clients here and there. I had different programs that I ran. Some were successful, some were not. It was like haphazard. But overall, there wasn't this like strong momentum. And I just kept feeling something is not right. Something is not right. It's not happening the way it used to. And I don't know how to fix it. And so began the period of everything dissolving in a way that life was showing me, listen, woman, you don't know shit. You thought you knew, you found your person. I will still attest to the fact that on some level, Chris is my person. I mean, we talk about this all the time with each other. Like, we are absolute soulmates without a doubt. Doesn't mean we're life partners, but we are soulmates. Doesn't mean I can't have another soulmate who will be my life partner. But I thought, that's it. I found my person. We were getting married. We were debating whether we even wanted a kid or not. And it was like, okay, this was it. I was 100% sure that coaching was all I was going to do for the rest of my life and that I had figured out the business model of how to do it. I was pretty sure that I would settle down in Boulder and at least be there for 4 or 5 years, because I bought furniture finally after many years of being nomadic. And I was so sure that the group of people I had met in Boulder were my posse for life. They were the type of people I wanted to surround myself with. And that was that. There was a lot of things I really thought I was sure of. And then there was like the smaller things, like, oh, like a health protocol that I went on that I was so sure of. Like everything in me was like, I'm going to do this. It's going to solve this really big health problem I have. Done. Boy, was that humbling. I went through that whole protocol, created 10 other health problems, and didn't solve the original one. And in that same year, right, had this dissolution of my life partnership. My business model wasn't working anymore. I still love coaching and don't want coaching to go anywhere, but something about my business wasn't working anymore the way it used to. And several of my friendships didn't turn out at all as I expected in Boulder. And so it was just very humbling. I don't know. even, like there's business strategies. Like there was like, oh, what always worked for me was I guest taught at other people's events. I got clients. Like I've never been really a social media kind of gal. Like, I mean, I'm on it, but I don't, I'm a little too old to enjoy social media, to be honest, like for business. And yeah. Anyways, the point being that certain strategies that had worked for a really long time weren't working the same way. And I didn't understand why. I used to be on podcast. I used to get invited to podcasts all the time. Suddenly those invitations stopped. I used to get invited to events all the time. Those invitations got less. And then when they did happen, I wouldn't convert the way I had before. So a lot of things that just like weren't, I was like, okay, it's clear that life is asking you to pivot in some way and is also reminding you that you don't know shit. The second you think you know, oh, this is how my business strategy works, this is how I get leads, life is like, just kidding. And for a while, and there's still a part of me now, I'll admit, that's like battling this. Like there's still a part of me that goes, oh, you can't trust yourself. Like you've made decisions that weren't right. How do you even know if that you thought it was your intuition? And then look, it didn't pan out the way you wanted. And it's like, what if it's not about that? What if it's about that groundlessness? Like life is really asking me to learn a pretty Buddhist lesson, that my suffering is because I'm holding on to things, because I am trying to hold the trip together, so to speak, when the truth is there's nothing to hold together. You can never hold it. It's not up to you. And that doesn't make you bad or wrong or you're using the wrong strategy. It doesn't mean any of that shit. It's just how life goes. Things are steady and sturdy and then things are not. You think you found the person and then they're not there anymore. You think that you figured out the business strategy and how to get leads and then suddenly it don't work no more. You solve one health problem, you get another health problem. You gain friends, you lose friends. Like it's just life. And if you stop attaching to all these pieces coming and going, you will substantially decrease the amount of suffering and pain you're in. And, there's something about coming back to Lebanon each time that has me take inventory, very similar to when you have birthdays. You always come back. You're a year older and you're like, oh, what's changed? What have I learned? And it can be confronting sometimes, like, oh, or I had a really hard year, or I'm scared of the year ahead. But it's like, it's this phase of taking inventory, and going home to me does that. And I was sitting earlier today thinking about one of my milestones. So after my father shared with me about his milestone, 13, sitting there, he decided to take his life into his own hands. And he was like, that was a defining moment in my life. And when I think back to one of the most defining moments in my life, what comes up over and over and over again and has stood the test of time was also somewhere around the age of 13. I went to a Palestinian refugee camp, my first ever entering in Lebanon. And it changed everything for me. I remember seeing these kids in the worst living conditions I'd ever experienced my whole life. And this is post-Civil War Lebanon. Like, I wasn't exactly living in luxury. I walked through many streets that were pretty run down and fucked up, and bullet holes everywhere, and garbage everywhere, and stray dogs everywhere. I mean, I wasn't like living a sheltered life by any means. And yet I felt so sheltered after I walked into a Palestinian refugee camp for the first time. I was like, what is this? I didn't even know it was possible to live in such poverty. And yet everywhere I looked, the kids were smiling and they were happy. and they played with their ball that was usually a little deflated, and they just laughed, and their spirit was so good. And I just remember looking and being like, I was there on a like photography mission. Like we all had cameras, and it was for an exhibition that we were going to put together with all of our photos. And so I remember going in with a bit of a preconceived notion of, oh, I'm going to go in and take photos of the suffering and the pain and show the rest of the world how hard it is for these people who have been kicked out of their homes in Israel. Well, excuse me, the Palestinian territories, also known as Israel by some people, but were kicked out by Israeli forces out of their homes, out of their homeland, were then forced to flee to another country, Lebanon, to live in the worst conditions I've ever seen in my entire life, and are not granted the right to work. So no income. A doctor in Palestine could not even work as a taxi driver in Lebanon. That was their circumstance. And let me tell you, that is a fucking shitty deal. When I hear the rhetoric of manifestation coaches telling me you can have anything you want, I get fucking mad, because I think about those people, the Palestinian refugees, who their circumstances, they're fucked. They do not have many options. And so I was thinking about this today, like, wow, these people and their spirit, and there was so much positivity and so much joy and so much life force and so much spirit. And I remember being like so moved and struck. And I remember walking away and feeling like, wow, this is an important moment, Nadia. Like, clock this. Don't forget this. And for years, I wrote about it. I remember a lot of my college essays were actually on that moment because it was so pivotal. Like, it cut to the core of my being at 13, you know? And I get very emotional about it now because I see how life was trying to show me something at a very early age. And I had to take this journey of doing it a different way, of trying to change my circumstances, and ultimately coming back to a place of, still suffering. Suffering in the Buddhist sense. I mean, I don't want it to sound so dramatic. I mean, just feeling stuck, feeling like, oh, like something's not right, and wanting to change things. And all that suffering, all that pain is from constantly wanting to change my circumstances, because there's the belief that I have the control to change my circumstances, which is a lot of what these manifesting coaches are saying, which again isn't completely wrong, because yes, our energy and our embodiment and our vibration 100% attracts certain opportunities. When you're in a low fucking vibration, like this last year, I have not been at my peak. I just haven't. I'm still showing up. I still have clients who I love and I adore, and whose lives I'm changing and helping them change their own lives. I'm still showing up for this podcast. I'm still doing my best to create value and content. And is it the best year of my life? No fucking way. Is it the worst? Nah. We shall see. Because I don't know, right? I don't know. It could in a way be the best. It's through suffering that I might reach this level of like liberation that I've just never had before. But I am like brought to my knees when I think back to that trip. When I think back to even in later years, that trip inspired me to start teaching English at another refugee camp, another Palestinian refugee camp closer to home for me. Every Sunday, me and 3 other girlfriends, we all would go and we would teach different ages. We each had our class, and we would teach them English on Sundays as a way to, as a tool, like, hey, hopefully you learning English will help you somehow get out of these camps and possibly secure work abroad. And actually, I'm still in touch with one of my students who now lives in Germany and somehow managed to get himself out of the Palestinian refugee camps to Germany, which is so beautiful. And he messaged me and he's doing well. And it's just so sweet to know that at least one of them got out, you know? So let me get my bearings. I got like emotional, and I feel like I got like, it's like you swivel far into the heart, into the feminine, and then you're like, wait, hold on, what was the structure? Let me come back to the masculine. And I just think that I'm finally getting it. And that doesn't mean I'm going to sway, like swing the pendulum all the way to like, I don't know anything. I'm never going to take responsibility for anything. I'm never going to try to strategize anything. No, I don't agree. I don't think that that's going to be my way. But right now, I can really see how life is like, oh, you're not getting it, woman. You are not getting it. Okay, I will continue to take away things from you temporarily or forever. I don't know. So you understand this lesson of impermanence, of groundlessness, of the futility and the suffering you're creating for yourself by trying to continuously hold this trip together, control things, keep a ground under you. Yeah, okay, so you had a coaching business for 10 years and now suddenly, poof, something's not working. What made you think that just because you did 10 years, it's going to keep going? And to clarify, I'm pretty sure I'm keeping my coaching business. I think there's a huge pivot coming and I haven't fully landed on exactly what that looks like. But it's a big pivot. Like I can feel it. But it's not ready. Just sitting here waiting, which is excruciating for someone like me who's always been taught, be proactive, get it together, move forward, come up with an answer. What is the problem? Solve it. Execute. Try again, try a third time. I mean, so much trying. And then the former partner who's like, I don't know, I don't try. I lean back and wait for the answer or the clarity or, the next nudge. And I'm over here going, I don't have any nudges. Everything's falling apart. What do I do? And the hardest work for me, I have no problem getting up and working my ass off. That part's so easy for me. If someone's like, here's a strategy, go implement it. I am such a doer and such an executor. It's why I was an amazing film producer and event producer. I can get shit done fast, methodical, organized, strategic. But that is not what I am here to learn in this lifetime. I already know how to do that shit. Mine is like, oh no, woman, you got to lean back and let the fog clear. And I'm literally sitting in fog as I record this to you guys. I mean, it's just stupid, the metaphors around me, right? Like I'm literally sitting here looking at the window in the mountains of Lebanon going like, I cannot see because it's so foggy. And that's such a rare occasion here. It just doesn't happen. I'm like, okay, God, I get it. But I'm stubborn. I'm a pretty stubborn motherfucker. Everyone who knows me knows that. And so I think life has to really like just give me quite a few hits on the head. Like, okay, do you get it? Do you get it? And a lot of things have to happen for me to actually let go of trying to make things happen. And it is the hardest thing for me. Oh my God, admitting that I don't know. Talk about an ego death. When so much of your ego is built on knowing, and then you're being asked to go, I don't know. Then you're being asked to trust and have faith, which is what these kids had, right? Like, to have spirit and joy in the face of such fucked up circumstances, you gotta have faith. I have to readjust. How is this gonna sound? I'm gonna hear all the bed sheets moving around, crinkling. Yeah, my legs were falling asleep. I had to readjust. Which, by the way, Pema Chodron talks about in the book. She's like, oh, in meditation, we always, we're sitting cross-legged, and then your feet get, your legs get numb, and you're like, oh, if I can just change positions, life is I'm gonna feel better. But then you change positions, and she's like, it's futile, because in 5-10 minutes, your legs are gonna numb up again or get itchy or tired. And I just think it's funny that literally happened to my legs as I'm talking to you guys about this. Because right now, the position I'm in, also not sustainable. In 10 minutes, I'll probably have to move my legs again, but hopefully by then I'll have wrapped up today's podcast. But right, like, this is so symbolic of how we think, oh, okay, I finally found the right position. Oh, I can exhale and land. But the exhale comes from the realization that we're never going to land, and we're always going to be moving. And there's just going to be these moments of total dissolution. And boy, am I in it. I have never been in so much dissolution in my life. I've never been humbled by the loss of so many things in all the different areas. Usually it was like, I always had a place for my ego to latch onto. It's like, oh, okay, business is not going so great this quarter. Okay, but I'm doing amazing in my love life. Like, look at this solid as fuck partnership. Or, oh, partnership's not going so great. It's okay. I have a web of sisterhood, like, till the end of time. Sisterhood is my, like, amazing thing. And I've written posts about this, like, basically bragging, like, look at me, I'm so great at sisterhood. Guess what happened this year? A whole bunch of friendships just dissolved. And they're meant to. I mean, I'm sad about it, but I think they're meant to. I'm learning more and more to really trust that there's I'm not meant to be friends with every single person, and that I get to hold boundaries and standards. But the point being that anytime you think, oh, I'm solid in this area of my life, is probably when things will start to dissolve. If that's the lesson you're meant to be learning, which it clearly is for me. The fact that the unnerving itchiness of hearing my former partner say, I don't know, was probably a combination of my own resistance and stubbornness to wisdom trying to come through him to me, combined with the fact that I'm probably not exactly like him, and that I will probably find somewhere in the middle. Because I used to, and still have moments, right? I'm grappling with like, I don't know, was it to me equated with obliviousness, was equated with weakness, it was equated with lack of initiative. And in certain ways, I'm still working that one out. I'm not sure where I stand on it, because I still sometimes feel like, total not knowing. I don't know that I want to be that oblivious, but I'm starting to really understand the beauty of I don't know, the wisdom of I don't know. And as I started to get to this place, the people in my life who I truly look up to, healers, teachers, my therapist, all of them, when I would say, oh, I don't know anything anymore. And they would be like, welcome, congratulations. Now you get to start. this is a true landing into your spiritual path. And I'm like, oh my God, is this what it feels like to be spiritual? Because I got sold a very different thing. I thought it was going to be like flower crowns and $1 million and blah, blah. All those things. But instead, it's me suspended in liminal space and, having ego deaths and being like, I don't know anything anymore. And everyone's like, welcome to enlightenment. Ooh. And then I go, do I want to be enlightened? And I think the answer is, again, half-half. Yes, I strive for a deeper spiritual wisdom, and I also really like being a human and fucking up and being unevolved sometimes and just being in the beautiful pleasure of hedonism. Yeah, sure, I'll have wine and then coffee and then dessert that has gluten and all the things I'm not supposed to eat. And yeah, fuck it. You live once. And also, I don't know. So I cannot possibly end today's episode with a conclusion, because then it would be in opposition to what I'm talking about, because I would be like, I know this. And you guys know me. I have opinions about all sorts of things. Otherwise, I wouldn't have a podcast that has solo episodes. In my human design, I am undefined everywhere. Like, I'm basically practically a reflector, but I'm an undefined projector, and all that's defined for me is ajna, my head, and my throat, which means opinions galore, and I talk about them. I have very solid opinions that are mine and mine only, and I speak about them a lot. And it's important for me to speak about them. Everything else, undefined. How I feel, half the time it's someone else's feelings. Where I ground, don't have it, right? Like energy, don't have it. There's a lot of undefined places, but what I do have is opinions. So it's so interesting that part of my spiritual path is to go, okay, it's not that you cannot have opinions or stances on the matter, but don't get attached to them. Don't hold on to them, because chances are they're going to change. What you were 100% convinced of when you were 25 years old is not what you're going to be 100% convinced of when you're 45 or 55. So stop attaching and just let it be. Let it come and go. Ride the wave, the ebb and flow of things. And don't go, oh, I'm not going to try to ever have an opinion again, or I'm not going to ever try to create ground again. No, you will. I will. I would really like to have momentum again, like feel way more jazzed up and alive in all areas of my life, to be honest. Like everything right now is pretty fucking at very bare minimum. And I'm ready to amp that shit up again. But I'm hoping that I will remember this time when it does amp back up, because I know it will. It's just the ebb and flow of life. I don't know when, but it's got to amp back up. When it amps back up, that I don't make meaning out of it, that, oh, I suddenly figured out the strategy, or I suddenly became a better spiritual person and I'm now getting rewarded for it, or any of these things, these philosophies that we hold on to. Instead, go, okay, we're in a good chapter. And probably be in a pretty hard chapter soon. But how can I make it less hard? By not having my inner state be dependent on my circumstances, and by not attaching to the ground and then blaming myself when the ground falls out under me. I'm not broken. There's nothing I have to fix. But that is just a part of life. That's it. It's just a part of life. The end. I love you guys so much. Thank you for listening. We would love for you to rate and review the show, and I'd love to know your takeaways from the episode. You can do that by DMing me on Instagram at Nadia Munla.